Ukraine is proposing a prisoner swap. It's part of efforts to resolve a standoff at the Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol. The plan would see wounded Ukrainian soldiers evacuated in exchange for releasing more Russian prisoners of war. Meanwhile, Ukrainian forces say they've successfully pushed back Russian troops around the northeastern city of Kharkiv. Some residents who fled the fighting have begun returning to their villages.
Home at last. Tatiana has returned to her village for the first time in 2 months. But there's not much left of her house. Her garden is littered with the aftermath of Russia's invasion. Tatiana's goats, at least, survived the onslaught.
Russians are our brothers. I could have never imagined anything like this. This aggression and destruction. When I came home, I kissed the ground. Now I have nothing. Where am I supposed to live and what should I do?
Neighbors in the village weren't spared either, and also came back to find piles of rubble where their homes once stood. But perhaps nowhere are the ruins greater than Mariupol after weeks of relentless bombardment. Russian forces and their separatist allies are now in control of almost all of the strategic port city. Before rebuilding can begin, crews must first clear massive amounts of rubble. I used to have 3 rooms, now only half of one. When I came up from the shelter, I opened the door, and there was no apartment anymore. That was scary. Residents who have remained behind are now trying to get on with their lives. And in many cases, that means improvising. The lone holdout of resistance remains the Azovstal steel plant, where fighters trapped underground have been withstanding Russian pounding. The Ukrainian government has proposed swapping them in exchange for Russian soldiers captured during their invasion of Ukraine.
Our correspondent Ami Enesef is in the west of Ukraine, in Lviv. Are there signs this prisoner swap could actually happen?
It looks unlikely at this point, Ben, because Russia has so far said it will only swap prisoners of war for prisoners of war. If you look at it, this is an unusual ask to swap prisoners of war from the Russian side for, on the Ukrainian side, combatants who have so far refused to submit to the Russian forces, to give up the Azovstal steel plant. Now, they would be suggesting to swap wounded prisoners, but Russia does not see them as captives and says that that's not playing by the rules. So far, not a yes from the Russian side, and keep in mind that Russia is very fixated on a victory here at the Azovstal steel plant because of the regiment that is defending it. Now, these are from, they have far-right roots, this battalion. A lot of them wear Nazi insignia on their clothing, so this lends some weight to the false Russian claim that they're denazifying Ukraine, and in Russia this would be a big victory if they were able to capture that plant and either take them captive or essentially kill the people who are defending that plant, the Azov battalion. But Russia has also swapped Ukrainian heroes of war, including the defenders of Snake Island, who once told a Russian warship, gave that an expletive and told it to go away before they were captured. Ben.
Now, the president has praised Ukraine's latest counteroffensive in the east, claiming that some towns have been recaptured. Are the tables turning there?
Now, this would be a big victory for Ukraine if it could secure Kharkiv, which is the second largest city. We saw that happen with the first largest city, the capital Kiev, where Russian forces were pushed out of villages and eventually gave up trying to capture the capital. And that's what they're hoping to see in Kharkiv right now. Because these villages have been liberated, Russian tanks and artillery are not in range of firing on that city, which is a godsend for a lot of people living there. But Russia remains entrenched in the area, so in the east of Ukraine. And what you don't hear a lot on Ukrainian media is the victories of Russia, Severodonetsk, which is the largest city in the east that has not been captured by Russia, has been completely surrounded, and a lot of analysts are saying that that battle is lost, that city will fall to Russia, and Russia seems to be shoring up its victories in the east and securing an area that it had mostly occupied already since 2014, Ben.
Ami, and what about Ukrainians? Did they see some sort of end to this war?
Now, Zelensky said recently that they need to be patient, that Ukrainians cannot expect a victory every day or even every week. And as many people have described it, outside of Ukraine, it's a stalemate. But Ukrainians, at least here in the West, remain very confident that they will win this war. A lot of Ukrainians are now proposing maximalist gains from this war, saying that they want to push Russia completely out of the east. So morale is not broken. And don't forget that Ukraine still has hundreds of thousands of men that they can call on to fight. So this is turning into a situation, Ben, like they've seen since 2014, where Russia is mostly confined to the east. It's something that they've been used to and which they've already been dealing with for many years and are willing to deal with for many more years until they can reclaim their country and secure a victory over the invaders. And that's how they see it, Ben.
Ami and SF, thank you very much for your reporting from Lviv. And for more on that, we're joined by our regular military analyst, Frank Ledwidge. What's your take on Russia's focus on the east and southeast of Ukraine first up?
Well, good morning, Ben. Two issues here. First of all, your correspondent already mentioned the importance of getting the Russians out of artillery range. They've been out of artillery range for a couple of days now, at least most tube artillery. But there's also another purpose, and that is to strike at Russia's lines of communication with that southern front. In other words, the Ukrainians are now in range of Russian railways into the south. In the southeast itself, the Russian offensive continues to stall. Yesterday, the Russians announced, or one arm of its media announced, that the town mentioned by your correspondent there, Severodonetsk, is a fortress town. And I would suggest the reason for that announcement is they're shaping people for a lot of casualties in a long time. The city is, Russians are close. They haven't made much in the way of advances in the last couple of days. And some of your viewers may have seen pictures yesterday of a rather major strike by Ukrainian forces on a couple of bridges. That's in another part of Donbass where the Russians were trying to surround Ukrainian forces and failed yesterday.
And in the northeast, President Zelensky says Ukraine's military is gradually pushing Russian troops away from Kharkiv. Is Ukraine capable of a full-on counter-offensive?
It's shown itself to be fully capable of retaking ground. The issue around Kharkiv is, I think, that the Russian forces were fairly thinly spread. They were clearly there to provide a presence, and Ukrainian forces for the last two and a half, 3 weeks now have been taking advantage of that. Russians have been pulling forces back from Donbass to try and shore their defences up. But in the medium term, there's no doubt at all the Ukrainians are more than capable of conducting counterattacks. But what they need is that continuous stream of replacement weapon systems and strengthening weapon systems. What they've had up to now is enough to hold. What they need now are weapons that's going to allow them to attack again. They need better tanks, more artillery, more drones, and replacements for the systems they've lost.
To come back to what you were alluding to before, the governor of Russia's Belgorod region, which borders Ukraine, recently claimed one person died in an attack from the Ukrainian side. Kiev hasn't claimed responsibility, but could the war spill over into Russian territory?
Well, Kiev has never claimed responsibility for any of the unusual and unfortunate fires or events, damaging events that have taken place in Russia, and is unlikely to do so. But certainly they do seem capable of helicopter strike attacks into Russia. They've done that before, apparently in Belgrade itself, and possibly sabotage attacks, although a lot of doubt about that in the rest of Russia. So yes, certainly Ukraine's capable of that, just as much as, well, perhaps more than we ever thought they were.
Thanks for the insight, Frank Ledwidge.
Thank you, Ben.
To Belgium now, where the first Ukrainian refugees are preparing to move into specially built villages in cities like Antwerp and Mechelen. The villages aren't designed as a long-term solution, but they are designed to meet the acute needs of those fleeing the violence.
Little Evelina's world just got a lot brighter.
Boy.
Pretty, the 3-year-old Ukrainian says, in Dutch, and her grandmother Ira agrees.
Apartment is very, very good. Thank you.
The family is moving into a newly built unit in Antwerp's Ukrainian village, the first of several emergency housing centers to be built throughout Belgium. Ira marvels at having their own kitchen and bathroom after months in a shelter. Things that once were normal can evoke extreme gratitude when war steals your stability. Project manager Jo Engelin says the apartments are designed and furnished to make these families feel good.
We want to have a fully self-contained apartment, so everything that they need is in it.
The builders put up these screens, symbolic of Ukrainian independence, to beautify the environment while the village remains under construction. But the families we met didn't seem to see anything except a safe space to call their own.
The project's interpreter, Ilona, herself a refugee, says it's an amazing feeling even for her.
In one moment, from nothing to own houses. It's really cool.
6-year-old Akim thinks so too. His mother Eliza can explain in one word what this apartment means for her family.
Свобода.
Freedom. For Eliza and her best friend Vida, it's their second time as refugees. They fled eastern Ukraine when conflict broke out there in 2014. Now they must start over again. Such trauma is one reason Antwerp authorities decided to build the village, even hiring Ukrainian refugees to help, rather than spreading them throughout the city.
Give them a good feeling that they are welcome here, trying to get them at least together to comfort each other and to have some link with Ukraine, and on the other hand, integrate them in our city.
But leaving the Ukrainian village to interact with the wider Antwerp community will be essential to truly integrate and to find work, says researcher Fatih Yilmaz, who's been working with Ukrainian newcomers.
So, of course, it might be difficult for them, but the government or the local authorities need to take some extra measures to organize, for example, language courses or some other activities.
But in fact, the village is meant to be temporary. Everything, even its sewage system, can be removed. Bart Bruleman says Antwerp authorities will reassess geopolitical factors in the fall to determine whether the site is still needed. Many Ukrainians maintain they want to go back to their country. 22-year-old Alika, Elisa's daughter, keeps a virtual eye on their house in Kiev.
Every day.
Alika says as grateful as she is for this Antwerp apartment, it reassures her to know their home in Ukraine is waiting for them too.